Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is David Corey and welcome to another one of our episodes in a series. This series is called EQ and U, and we'll be talking about each of the 15 competencies and what they might mean for you. So today's topic is emotional self-expression. And we're going to be talking about how we express our emotions and why. You're seeing a bit of a different background for me today because I just gave a presentation to a group of hotel HR managers, and they were kind enough to find me a boardroom to hold the video call from because I just finished that. And one of the things that came up, as often does, is about the differences between men and women and the extent to which we express ourselves emotionally. And people want to think that there's some sort of biological reason for that, and while there may be a biological reason for that, what I do know is that when I was young, and I think is the same for learned about emotions, was big boys don't cry. And if that's what we learn, if society teaches us that big boys don't cry, then we learn some very different ways of dealing with emotions. And we certainly get the message that expressing those emotions, particularly when it's an emotion like crying, is not acceptable. And so we have to find other ways of dealing with those emotions. And then in turn, what happens is that we end up finding other ways to ignore or stuff down or not deal with other emotions as well. And so I've got my good friend and colleague Kim Cairns on the line here, and we've got the newest member of our team joining us as well, Mike Walters. But Mike is choosing to be an observer this morning, and so you'll see his photo at the bottom of the page there. But he won't, or maybe he will, join us in our conversation today. So good morning, Kim. How are you?
Good morning, Dave. I'm fine, thanks. And speaking to you from Toronto, and I'm not sure the connection that I have today, so it might be a bit wobbly, folks. But glad to be here talking about emotional expression, and I've been doing a lot of emotional expression in this last couple of days. I'm spending time with a very good friend of mine. We've known each other since we were 12 years old, and we do happen to be a couple of males. And so we've known each other for 52 years, and it's been an interesting journey. He's an actor, has been an actor all of his adult life, and we were talking last night about how fortunate we were at the age of 15 to be part of a leadership program with the Calgary Y. We were training to be summer camp counselors for an entire summer at the age of 15. That was in 1967. And at the time, there were a lot of things going on in the developmental field, and some of the staff at the Y Camp at that time had been through T group processes as part of their university training. So our leader for that summer took us on a T group excursion for 10 weeks, and one of the things that really came out of that for both of us, as we were talking last night, was that absolute importance of being able to understand what we were feeling, why we were feeling that, and to be able to articulate that to the group that we were working with. So that was our immersion process in emotional self-awareness and emotional expression, and just what a valuable time that has been in both of our lives. To be able to understand what's going on for us emotionally and be able to articulate those feelings. So we both had a bit of a chuckle about that, and in terms of here we are today gathered to talk about emotional expression.
That's great, Kim, and of course, what you're suggesting is that we can learn, even if we're male. We can learn how to express ourselves emotionally, and I think absolutely we can, and we come fully equipped with the very same emotional operating system as anyone else on the planet, no matter what culture or what gender you happen to identify with. we all have the ability to express our emotions, and Kim, it's it's like the proverbial iceberg that we often talk about. The fact that 20%, the 20% above the surface is what you see, and it's where we're comfortable and where we spend most of our time. But to go beneath the surface and actually express to others what's happening beneath our own surface emotionally, this actually sets us up for connection at a deep level. And superficial relationships stay above the surface, and the extent to which you're willing and able to go beneath the surface and share what's beneath the surface, of course, is just gonna help, and you can do it at any age, and even if you're a male, which is interesting.
Well, and your iceberg analogy is interesting too, Dave. I was flipping through the EQ Edge this week during a certification course that we were doing here in Toronto, and a study done where talking about emotional expression, and the study that was conducted came out with results of 7% of what we actually say is remembered, 38% of the tone of our voice is remembered, and 55% of our body language. So I think it's important to just talk about, it's not just the words that are coming out of our mouth. Our facial expressions and our body language in congruence with the words that we're saying. Are our eyes in congruence with that? And to be thinking about that whole package of emotional expression.
Well,
and what?
Yeah,
go ahead.
This is why it's such a fallacy to think that we can stuff down our emotions and no one will know about it. Emotions leak out, and we're not fooling anyone when we try to hide things. People pick up on it, and they pick up on those facial expressions and that body language, and it's very difficult to hide it. So why not just share it?
Yes. Well, and I think what it speaks to me too, Dave, is actually being fully present in those situations. If I'm fully present, then it's all of me that's speaking. I'm not trying to withhold or monitor various parts of it. I'm presenting my authentic self in that situation. And for me, that's just a nice thing to keep in mind. What's my desired outcome in this conversation? What is it that I'm feeling, and how do I want to express that? And remember that I'm going to bring my whole self to that expression.
Well, and Kim, I'm okay with that, but as long as society is teaching us that there are certain emotions that are acceptable and certain emotions that are unacceptable, and there's certain ways for men to be that's acceptable and certain ways for women to be that are acceptable, then I'm going to be filtering everything that you express to me through that, and I'm going to make judgments about that. And so we got a lot of work to do as a society to make emotional expression acceptable, so that men can express their sorrow and their loneliness and their sadness, and women can express their frustration and their anger without being labeled as that bad word that starts with B. You still with me, Kim? Uh-oh.
Partially, Dave. There's a bit of breakup. I was catching about every third or fourth word there.
Oh no. Well, we often talk about emotional expression in conjunction with emotional self-awareness. So we become aware of our emotions and understand them first, then we express them. And I found this a study interesting, Kim, and maybe you could talk a little bit about what this means. And that is that when we say to someone, "I am angry," it actually lowers the level of the stress hormone cortisol in our system. And great if we could always just express what we're feeling and just get it out and be more authentic and genuine around that rather than having to pretend otherwise. Because the having to pretend otherwise creates all kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think that there's an aspect there of willing to be vulnerable. And again, you know, we've talked about Brené Brown a number of times, and again, would heartily recommend that people take in her TED Talks and take a look at her books around that vulnerability factor. That just how valuable vulnerability is. It's you know, in our culture is viewed as something not to be, when in fact some really good results can come from being vulnerable and giving expression to what we're feeling. So you know, when I have that feeling that I want to throw a plate against the wall, that's probably a good time to express why I'm feeling that way in the moment prior to throwing the plate.
And just to be clear, we're not advocating the throwing of plates against the wall. However, we are supporting and encouraging the appropriate expression of emotion. And when we don't, all kinds of negative issues arise. For example, heart disease and hardening of the arteries, high blood pressure. A lot of these things can be related to the way that we don't deal with our emotions on a regular basis.
Yeah, that containment and suppression isn't a very effective way to be living a full and healthy life. That suppression and containment comes with a cost. Again, what comes to my mind is, what's the outcome I desire in this conversation? And I think if we look through that list, my desire is to be heard and understood, and the other part of that is to hear and understand. And if I have that outcome in my mind, that's that guidepost for that conversation, and then I am operating in congruence with what I'm feeling and what my values are and what my desired outcome is.
Well, you know, you mentioned withholding that information comes at a cost. It comes at a huge cost to relationships. Just think, relationships, again, relationships are only as deep and meaningful as what you choose to share from beneath your surface of the proverbial iceberg. And so if you're not sharing that information, then people don't get the chance to know you. And it's so critical in our leadership courses. You know, we talk a lot about authenticity. And we talk about integrity. And we talk about people really knowing you as a human being. And when they get a chance to know you, get a chance to see beneath your surface, they trust you. So if we don't share beneath the surface, if we don't express our emotions, how can we even trust anyone, Kim, if we don't share beneath our surface?
Yeah, I think what it tends to do is it puts us on edge when we feel that lack of trust coming in. When we're getting mixed messages, when I'm hearing you say something, but the set of your jaw and the look in your eye is saying something different than what the words are, that check and balance on trust starts to drop for me. I'm thinking, okay, this is something to be wary of here. I'm hearing something. It's not congruent with what I'm looking at. So again, and that's what we talked about at the top. It's just bring your full self there, and it's not about constantly checking every second, but okay, is my facial expression okay? Are my eyes saying what my words are? It is just about being fully present there and being vulnerable, being willing to be vulnerable. And I think from a leadership perspective, you know, if you're leading me and I'm hearing what you have to say, and your full body expression is supporting those words, I'm engaged in the process then, and it's valuable information for me to hear about what you're feeling, because it's going to have impact on what part I'm contributing to that project or that job or that conversation, to fully understand where you're coming from and some of the emotional drive behind those decisions that you're making.
Kim, why don't people want to be vulnerable?
Well, Dave, I think there's just such huge pressure in our culture from very early on to present as fully formed and fully functioning. There's just that pressure to always appear that way. So to appear anything other than that means you're going to be perceived as weak and not capable, without capacity. So those messages are driven home quite strongly, and I think that's for both genders too. It's just appear that you know everything and are on top of your game, when in fact being on top of your game is realizing what parts of your game you're working on a continual basis. We are all works in progress. There is no final point that we get to in regard to anything in life.
Absolutely, and I think that we are encouraging the expression of something which comes with its own inherent imperfection, and we're suggesting that we do that within a culture of perfection. This drive to be perfect. You know, you have to, everything has to be perfect. I've even noticed, I don't know about you, Kim, and maybe this sort of gives away how old we are, but the young servers in restaurants now, when you place an order, it's perfect. When they ask how things are going and we say it's going okay, the response is perfect. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's very little that's perfect, and I get it. It's an expression, it's a saying, but really it's restrictive for us, because if we think that we are going to express all of our emotions perfectly every time, well, that's just not a realistic expectation. And again, going back to something that we often talk about, and that is that that beneath the surface is uncomfortable, and we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's the way to learn emotional expression. In fact, how would you suggest that someone starts out, Kim, if they really don't know how to express their emotions? Where do you even start?
Well, I think you know, Dave, one of the important parts is to get really clear about all of the emotions that we're experiencing. I think that when people talk about emotion, generally what comes up is angry and happy. There's not much thought given to that full range of emotions between those two ends of the continuum. So I think a great starting place is just to get familiar with the words, the descriptions of a feeling, and what that means for me. So it's about increasing my own internal vocabulary about feelings and starting to be more aware of those subtle changes that are going on within, not going from 0 to 60. You know, we go from 0 to 60, but we still have to go through all of those speeds to get there. So to heighten our awareness of what those speed shifts are, and what are the causal factors for that? Why am I feeling like this? What's actually going on for me in this instance? So again, it's that notion of curiosity about ourselves combined with curiosity about others.
Right.
And again, I I love that phrase, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because life's uncomfortable. Life's full of change, and so to get into that notion of it's okay to stumble around a bit within this as I'm learning.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess what we would say to people who say, you know, I really don't know how to express my emotions, and I don't really see a need. I don't see the reason why I would. I would say to those people that you know, what we're always talking about, Kim, the idea that alone we're limited, and together we can do anything. And when we carry a burden alone, it can get heavy and unwieldy, and really it can really load us down. And when we share it, it becomes lighter. And who do you share that with? Well, you share that with your spouse, share that with your significant other, share it with a friend. But it's so interesting. I think that people think that if they share the difficulty they're going through, the struggle they're going through, it's a little bit like men asking for directions. Uh, we don't ask for directions because it's a sign of weakness, and I think again we don't say to people that we're sad, we're grieving, we're alone, we're lonely, because again, there's a societal expectation that we're fine just the way we are, like Simon and Garfunkel's song "I Am a Rock, I Am an Island," which is such a sad song about loneliness and being stuck inside walls with and not connecting with anyone. So we know that relationships are good for us, and they contribute to our happiness and our longevity. Many studies show this, and so. It's interesting that looking at older people that women have more of these kinds of relationships to support them in their old age than men do. So if you want to be happy in your old age, figure out how to express your emotions to your friends so that you have that connection and you have that shared life experience. What else?
And Dave, too, I think it's so important to keep in mind that it's not either or. Like you mentioned, I Am a Rock, Simon and Garfunkel. And in the upcoming weeks, we'll be talking about independence. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that if I'm able to talk about what's going on emotionally with me, it doesn't mean I give up my independent part of myself, too. It's important to think about being able to bring both things forward. It's not an either-or situation. Being independent is also an important part of depth of relationship with people too. I need to bring my independent part. So it's about the blending and the interweaving of these things. And I think sometimes when we're talking about these competencies individually, people might get the notion that, well, what we're really pounding home here is be vulnerable all the time. And there is no all the time. It's contextual. It depends on what environment we're in, but it is about being able to fully go there, whatever direction we're going in. So I just wanted to toss that in.
Kim, like we always say, these are 15 instruments in an orchestra, and it's about being able to draw on the instruments that are going to help you to be most effective in a given situation. And we also know that these are the tools of life. These are the tools of being able to create a sense of personal and professional well-being for yourself. So we can't overlook any one of them, and we use them in combination. Jill was my spouse. Jill was asking me about what's the one of the other 15 competencies you need to consider so that emotional expression doesn't run amok, because it could. If you're just going around talking about your emotions and feelings all the time, you could drive everyone away. And of course, it would be impulse control and maybe a bit of reality testing. And it's so interesting how that works, isn't it, Kim? That we've got these combinations that seem to make us more or less effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think another one involved in there is that emotional self-awareness component. It's important to be aware of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I need to give voice to every aspect of that's going on inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that would be the other one when you are more emotionally self-aware, you have a greater understanding of what sorts of stimuli create what kinds of emotional responses in you, and a position to express that effectively to deepen the relationships that you're in. So, yeah.
And I think too, Dave, I don't know if we mentioned this in our last call, but that heightening of my own emotional self-awareness also promotes a greater awareness of what's going on with somebody else that I'm interacting with too. And when I give voice to that, that's encouraging other people to give voice to what's going on emotionally for them too. So it does promote that dialogue back and forth. it is being the change that I want to see. So if I keep that in mind, that's a good governor too for what is the change I want to see here. What is it I want to see happening here? And that helps guide how I'm going to behave in that situation.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to express.
Absolutely. We role model all the time the way that we want others to be around us. And so the question is, what do you want your relationships to look like? Are you happy with the level of relationship that you have with those important people in your life, those people that you care about, those people that you work with every day? And how can you deepen those relationships? How can you make them better? You can share more of what's going on beneath your surface. And it's so interesting when you do, people are drawn to that. People are interested in that. People feel like you have bestowed an honor upon them by trusting them enough to share what's happening for you emotionally. So give it a try. It's one of those things that absolutely will improve your relationships in your life, and we just wish you all the best with it. What else do we want to tell the good folks, the good viewers here, Kim? What else do we want to tell them about emotional expression before we say goodbye?
Well, I'm realizing what the time is here, Dave, and what I really wanted to say was we're not getting as many stories from you folks out there about how the EQ competencies are unfolding in your life. What are some of the successful emotionally intelligent interactions that you've had in the past couple of weeks, in the past couple of months? What are some of the things that you're struggling with? I think it's just important to be talking about. We want this to be an interactive process, and are extremely interested in what's going on for other people out there. So just keep that in mind, that we're very interested in hearing your stories and your thoughts, and any recommendations around how we're conducting these broadcasts. Any thoughts that you might have around that, please feel free to communicate those thoughts and feelings to us.
Yes, we love to hear from everyone, and we especially like the comments and the questions. And please send those to us, and we'll include them in our next broadcast. And so join us in 2 weeks' time for our program on assertiveness. We'll have another discussion and talk about the importance of assertiveness and some of the differences between emotional expression and assertiveness, because absolutely there are differences that are important. So thanks very much for joining us today, everyone, from myself, David Corey, with the Emotional Intelligence Training Company, joining you from Vancouver, British Columbia, and my colleague Kim Cairns, who I left behind in Toronto so that I could come to Vancouver for this morning's presentation. Thank you very much. Kim, you want to wrap things up for us?
Well, folks, just give some thought to letting somebody know today how you're feeling, and maybe that's how you're feeling about them. But take a bit of a risk today. Release a bit of what you're feeling to somebody that's in your life, and see where it takes you. So thanks again for joining us, and I hope everybody's enjoying their summer.
Thanks, Kim. See everyone next time. Bye for now.